contributions. Okay, so the first country we'll be talking about today is Hungary, which is where my family is from. Just again is a map of Hungary. It's a pretty small country located in Central Europe, but it usually is delineated to Eastern Europe because of its involvement and membership in the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War. So yeah, basically Hungary is surrounded by quite a few countries. There's Austria, Slovakia, Ukraine, Romania, Serbia, and Croatia. And there are a lot of different minority populations. However, there's not a huge amount of them. And so I guess I'll be telling you about that. So here's some facts about ethnic or racial minorities in the US and Hungary. So in Hungary, about 84% of people who live there are Hungarian, ethnic Hungarians, whereas minorities include the Roma, which I'll be telling you guys more about today because that's the largest minority group in Hungary, and it's very much discriminated. They're very much discriminated against, unfortunately. Germans also live in Hungary, Slovaks, Croats, Romanians, people basically who are from these countries bordering Hungary do. So for instance, in like people who come from Germany maybe are closer to this side of Hungary, the western side, because it's closer to Germany and Austria, whereas people from like Romania are more towards the east, and Serbia are more in the south. Same with Croatia, since it's in the south as well. And then the US, so I took these figures from like the CIA World Factbook, and I'm not exactly sure when the data for the US was included, but at the time it was about 80% of the population in the US is white, whereas minorities are comprised of Hispanics, Blacks, Asians, and American Indian, Natives, and Asian Pacific Islanders. So like in white is like Indo-European, etc. So we have religious minorities as well, not only in the US, but also in Hungary. So Hungary is predominantly Christian. About maybe 50% or so of the population identifies with a Christian faith. However, Roman Catholicism is very strong there. So the Catholic way of life is very much incorporated in Hungary. A lot of people go to Mass and celebrate Lent and these other holidays. So for instance, when I was in Hungary for October 31st, which is Halloween here, we basically, my family and I celebrated another holiday, a Catholic holiday, which was November 1st, All Saints Day. Has anyone heard of All Saints Day? Awesome, yeah. So basically, we went and visited the cemetery, and a lot of people do that, go out and take candles at night and remember those who have passed away. So there wasn't like Halloween, but there was All Saints Day. So a lot of Catholic holidays are very much incorporated into Hungarian way of life, I suppose. But overall, it is, I guess, a Christian nation primarily. However, there's a lot of people who do not identify or who just are like unspecified. So I was just going to ask, because Hungary used to have a pretty considerable Jewish population, does anyone want to guess why there's not so much, like why there aren't as many Jews in Hungary anymore? You can just raise your hand and ask, or I don't know.
Hey. Because of Nazi occupation during World War II?
Yep, spot on. Unfortunately, during the Holocaust and during World War II, a lot of the Hungarian Jewish population was either deported to work camps or just executed. So For like the first part of the war, for most of it actually, Hungary was a relatively safe place for Hungarian Jews. It wasn't really a safe place for Jews of other ethnic minorities, but there was a distinction between Hungarian Jews and just like any Jew. And Hungarian Jews were, although persecuted, protected for the most part. However, once Nazi occupation occurred, when the Germans came in 1944, and Ferenc Szálasi, a fascist leader, was put into power, mass deportations of Jews began. So there were ghettos set up in Budapest. People were deported to Auschwitz, and or other places were just executed alongside the Danube River, which is a river that runs through the city. And so there's like a monument, for instance, that shows like shoes beside the river to represent all the people who were shot and killed. So it's very sad, but it's estimated around 500,000 people were either deported or killed during that time. And so there's still a lot of like Jewish culture in Budapest. You know, there's a really nice synagogue and all these different things, but for the most part, there's not a huge Jewish population anymore, unfortunately. So this is just an example of, like a historical example of discrimination based on, you know, minorities. So here's just another quick comparison is like languages. So in Hungary, as you can see, almost 100% of the population speaks Hungarian, which is a very high percentage. So the reason why some of these, like, it doesn't add up to 100 is because some people are bilingual or trilingual. But English is the second most spoken language, and then German. A lot of businesses from like the EU and those areas come in, and there are quite a few expats. But in the US, about 80% of the population speaks English, followed by Spanish. And yeah, so I just wanted to show you guys this. There's not a huge diversity in languages in Hungary. So I'm going to be talking to you primarily about the Roma people who were also discriminated against, who still are unfortunately discriminated against in Hungary, but are or were persecuted during the Holocaust as well. So the Roma people, according to official numbers, is about 2% of the population, which would mean about 200,000 people. But there are estimates that it actually could be like on the low end, 500,000, or on a high end, almost 1 million people who live in Hungary who are Roma. So I guess I'll start with the history, but the history of the Roma people is that they're actually originally from northern India, and they came to Europe about 1,000 years ago, so around 1100. Today, the group is mainly found in Europe, but they're scattered kind of all across the world. I think there's about 12 million Roma people, around the world, but they're mainly in Europe, such as in Romania. But throughout their history, unfortunately, they were enslaved. At first, when they came to Europe, such as the Ottoman Empire, expelled, such as in Germany, they were just kicked out, or executed, such as in the Holocaust. So during the Holocaust, the amount of deaths of Roma people is uncertain, but the estimates are between 250,000 and 1 million, because, of course, during the Holocaust, a lot of different people were persecuted against. Unfortunately, today, not only in Hungary, but just in Europe in general, the Roma people are discriminated against. In Hungary, there is an institutionalized discrimination. So in terms of employment, housing, education, healthcare, basically they're discriminated against. Politically, there's a lot of anti-Roma sentiment, and usually they're demonized or, you know, basically spoken badly against with derogatory language. But the government in Hungary denies this. However, of course, there are speeches and there are things that you can actually see that, yes, this is occurring. Excuse me. And unfortunately, so the Roma unemployment rate in Hungary is about 70%, according to 2012 figure. That might have changed, but it's very high. And there's segregation, so they usually live in separate, you know, neighborhoods or dominantly Roma neighborhoods. So there's a suggestion that maybe one of the reasons why they remain so isolated and why they're so discriminated against is because they really try to avoid assimilation, or at least some of them do. So they try to preserve their own culture, but they have had this history where they've been persecuted against for so long that it makes sense that they would not want to necessarily be integrated into the culture, because they might get hurt again. But so unfortunately, there's definitely a lot of problems still going on with the Roma in Hungary in general. Unfortunately, because of it, there's a very far right political party called Jobbik, which is like to make Hungary better, or that's their slogan. But they're very anti-Semitic, and they're very anti-immigrant, and they're very anti-Roma, and they got about 17% of the vote, I think, in the last election, which is quite high, unfortunately. So basically, yeah, there's widespread discrimination against the Roma people. So Hungary is does not have the most amount of Roma. However, it does have quite a bit, from this map at least, in Europe, according to a 2008 thing. But Romania, you can see, in Turkey at that time had the most, but Roma can be found all over Europe. And I just wanted to show a couple of pictures. So this is like traditional Hungarian dress, traditional Hungarians, I suppose. And in Hungary, there's about 10 million people or so. Most of them are ethnic Magyars or Hungarians. And these are the Roma. Since they came from northern India, they look a little different. Unfortunately, they live most of the time in basically camps, or almost like camps, but where there's like not very good housing, and it's just not very safe for them. But unfortunately, their plight is not only a Hungarian issue, but it's a European-wide issue. So that's my spiel about Hungary and the Roma population. And next